Good day, everyone. Welcome to our another video lecture. And previously, I hosted a video lecture about Unit 2, Lesson 2. So at this point, we will continue with Unit 2. And of course, we are going to explore this time Lesson 3 under Unit 2. So we're still talking about the K-12 curriculum. So I believe you all are ready. Without further ado, allow me to share my screen to you guys, and we'll continue. So, okay, here it is. Our topic for the Unit 2, Lesson 3 is we'll talk about the components of the English curriculum. Of course, this is under the K-12 curriculum of the Philippines. In the previous lesson, we're talking about the outcomes of the K-12 English curriculum. And at this time, during this time, we'll discuss about the components of the English curriculum. This lesson is a bit long. It's actually the longest among the lessons under Unit 2. So it will take us time to definitely explore or talk about this topic. So the curriculum has 5 components, and these are the components that we are going to discuss each, as we progress. Each component is essential to the learner's ability to obviously communicate effectively. We have to always remember that our goal here is to produce students who could communicate effectively using the language. In our case, we will be teaching them the English language, leading them to achieve the communicative competence, as well as multiliteracies in the mother tongue, Filipino, and the English. But in our case, of course, we will focus on the English. Now, in the previous lesson, we already talked about communicative competence and multiliteracies as well. That really is the main goal or the very outcomes of the K-12 English curriculum. So let's try to watch this video.
Exploring the K-12 English Curriculum Guide. A curriculum guide is a well-structured document that delineates the philosophy, goals, objectives, pedagogical practices, instructional materials, and assessments that comprise a particular educational program. It also provides an articulation of what students should know and be able to do, as well as support to teachers in selecting how to achieve these goals. The foundations of the K-12 English curriculum are the theories of language teaching, theories of language teaching and acquisition, and theories of language.
Okay, always remember that the very foundation of the curriculum guide that the teachers are using in the basic education is, of course, the theories of language teaching, which you guys have probably learned in your the teaching of macro skills, if you had already took up that subject. And then the theories of language learning and acquisition. We also talk about some theories of language learning and acquisition in our subject materials. It's one of the major subjects that I was teaching you guys. So language learning materials for that subject. I'm sorry. So anyway, and then also the theories of language. So you guys learned about that. And also you guys were able to basically learn already some of the theories. So it's not anymore like new to you, right? So it's something that you already had even in your previous lesson. So we do have the second language acquisition theory of Stephen Krashen, Noam Chomsky, also one of the famous theorists. So language learning materials development. Yeah, that's the subject that we had previously. And we already explored a few theories. So that is the very basic foundation of the curriculum guide of the English curriculum guide, being distributed and used. So let's continue.
These theories have spared 5 components of the language teaching process that include spiral progression, integration, interaction, contextualization, and construction. These components guard effective use of language in 3 major applications of the macro skills in terms of understanding cultures, processes and strategies, and understanding language. The intricately intertwined and integrated listening, speaking and viewing, reading, viewing and responding, writing and representing promote the same outcome, which is thinking. It enables the students to make meaning through language. The main goals of the English curriculum are then achieved, honing communicative competence and multiliteracies among learners. The purpose of assessment is to measure the effectiveness of the curriculum's safeguarding components and applications. It gives the essential feedback to establish whether or not the learner's communication abilities and multiliteracies have been fully developed. As a result, the primary objectives are satisfied.
Okay, so looking at the graph or the figure, if you notice, not really graph, but looking at the figure, the flow chart, the diagram, that you can see on the screen. Of course, this is the very basic foundation, the theories, and grounded on the theories, we have the spiral progression. Like the idea of spiral progression is that the complexity of the lesson would be determined by the level of the student. For example, if your level is you are grade 7, of course, it's less complex if you will be in the grade 9. So the same, basically the same types of topics in a way, but the difficulty, the level of difficulty and complexity differs. So that's the spiral progression, so that there will be continuity in terms of the students' learning. And then we do also have integration and then interaction. So these are like the core. And then we have contextualization, like translating the topics into the students' context. And then, of course, construction. And then what we can find in the inner circle is that we do have, you need to understand language, we need to understand the culture, and we also need to have the process and strategies as teachers. And our macro skills are being developed: listening, speaking, and then the viewing. We do have reading, viewing, and responding, writing, and representing. And they are actually overlapping with thinking, because when you do all these things, you basically need your mind, you need to think. And the very core of all these is, of course, students were able to make meaning through language. And the outer, what's going to happen if we have this? So the outer, this one, the one in the line, of course, teachers should do assessment and giving feedback. And the very product or the very outcome of this is, of course, the outcome that we discussed in the previous lesson, which are students would be communicative competent and at the same time multiliterate. So we would be able to produce students who possess or who show communicative competence and multiliteracies as well, using this diagram grounded with the theories. And we implement or we put into action these things that are in the inner circle, which is the core. And then we also do assessment, and at the same time we give feedback, and this would be the outcome of this. So this is what the English curriculum is under the K-12. Now we do have here the K-12 basic education curriculum, the framework. So as what is already presented earlier, it is this one. So communicative competence and multiliteracies is a very, this is a better copy, this is actually clearer one. So we have theories of language teaching, theories of language learning and acquisition, and theories of language. And of course, our outcome here is the communicative competence and the multiliteracies. And this is our core. And we do have assessment.
There are 4 components to the program. Each component is critical to the learner's capacity to communicate successfully in a language, resulting in communicative competence and multiliteracies in their mother tongue, Filipino, and English.
So we do have 4 components. So earlier, I think it was mentioned 5, but we do have 4 components of the K-12 English curriculum. So it was a mistake. So component 1, we do have the language learning process. Component 2, effective language use. Component 3, making meaning through language. While component 4 is the holistic assessment. Now, component 1, actually, it illustrates class the learning processes that will affect acquisition and learning of the language. So here in component 1, it is being explained here the how of language learning. So how would we be able to learn language learning? And therefore, it serves as the guiding principles for language teaching. So how should teachers teach the language to the students? So there are basically, of course, guiding principles, because we cannot just teach a language without anchoring what we are doing to the principles and to the theories that already exist. So we have to bear in mind that the how of language learning, they are the ones that serve as guiding principles for language teachers. Now, component 2, it describes the knowledge and the skill areas, which are, of course, essential to effective language use. If we do have the knowledge and the skill areas, we would be able to understand the culture. We have to make sure we understand the culture, we understand the language, the processes, and the strategies. When we understand the culture, it would be easier for us as well to definitely understand the language, because culture and language, they always are together. And then the processes and strategies on how we could effectively use the language, which will be developed through language arts. The language arts class are the macro skills. And you guys know very well what are these macro skills, no? You do have the listening and speaking, the reading and writing, viewing. Well, there are already 5 macro skills, which are obviously very important. Now, component 3 shows the interdependence and the interrelationships of the macro skills of the language. So how do the macro skills depend, okay, are interrelated and interdependent among each other. We have the listening, the speaking, and the viewing, the reading, viewing, and even responding. So see, before I just knew it's 5, but we do have even like responding, writing, and even representing. So the macro skills actually are dynamic. The macro skills are dynamic. We keep on adding to the macro skills because of number 1 could be technology. So everything changes these days, and thanks to the very advanced technology that has obviously affected also, well, hopefully just always in a good way, the academe or the pedagogies, no, when we teach. So writing and representing and the development of thinking skills, we do have here the critical thinking, we create the creative thinking and the thinking beyond thinking or metacognition, and we allow the students to actually make meaning through language. So language is very important. Now the component 4, it explains the holistic assessment. So component 4 explains the holistic assessment of the language arts and literacy curriculum. Again, Component 4, it explains the holistic assessment of the language arts and literacy curriculum, which serves as the feedback of its effectiveness to students. We have the teachers, you have the school administrators, and at the same time, the curriculum developers. So to add, component 1 illustrates learning processes, or to summarize in a way, component 1 illustrates learning processes that definitely will affect the acquisition and learning of the language. This is what we call the how of language learning. And then component 2, we look into the knowledge and the skill areas, no? Which are essential for students to effectively use the language. And how would we be able to develop, or how would we be able to demonstrate that? Our knowledge and skill areas are being demonstrated through the language arts, through our macro skills, like how far could we listen? How far could we speak? Could we respond? Could we represent? How far could we listen to? How far could we write using that language? And component 3, it shows the interdependence and interrelationships among the macro skills now of the language, how our thinking develops that would allow us to be able to make meaning using the language that we are learning. So we have to create a meaning out of the language. Now the last would be component 4 rather, and it is the holistic assessment of the language art and the literacy curriculum. So we have to do assessment. And we're talking about holistic because it's not just only the traditional, but even the authentic assessment. We have to make sure we provide that to our learners.
The first component represents the learning process that will influence language acquisition and learning. It aligns how language learning occurs and so serves as a set of guiding principles for language teachers. Language teachers must adhere to the 6 language teaching principles in order for language acquisition and learning to be efficient. These beliefs illustrate how language evolved naturally.
So it's a language learning process, which is component 1, aligns how language learning occurs and serves as a guiding principle. Like, key terms here. And component 1, for effective language acquisition and learning to take place, language teachers must be guided by the 6 language teaching principles. So these principles actually explain the natural process of language development. Now, the language learning process under component 1 rather. So we have the 6 language teaching process that explain the natural process of language development. We do have spiral progression, interaction, integration, learner-centeredness, contextualization, and construction, where students would be able to create something. The spiral progression, we have to make sure that the topic, the level of difficulty progresses as the level of the students, the grade level of the students increases. So, for example, if your student is grade 7 and you're talking about a specific topic in grammar, of course, the level of complexity and the level of difficulty for that specific topic in grammar is suitable for grade 7. In the same topic, we could talk about, of course, in the next grade 8, but the level of its complexity and difficulty increases. So that's the spiral progression. Now, I would like to explain this further in a different discipline, looking into a different discipline as an example. During the time when I was in high school, our curriculum is very much different compared to the K-12 curriculum. Why? Because during our time, we didn't have the spiral progression, obviously. For example, for science and like mathematics, every high school, because it was still high school, like if your first year level, you would just basically learn about earth science, about science in general. That's for the science subject. But the question is there a spiral progression? Like when I go to second year, am I still talking, or am I still learning about earth science? Am I still learning about that specific area of science? And when I will be in second year? No, because in second year, it's going to be a different branch of science, which is biology. Biology was like, what's the focus? So when we are second year, we learn the biology. When we're in first year, we learn earth science, integrated science. So that. And then when we'll be in third year, are we going to keep learning biology? No, because our science the time would be chemistry. So see, it's different branch of sciences. And then of course, when we reach fourth year, it would not be about chemistry, it would be different. It's gonna be physics. But with a spiral progression, it's different. Now you are learning the same somehow topic all the way, you're still from first year all the way to until you become senior, but the level of complexity and difficulty differs. So that means there is continuum, or there is continuity rather, of the discipline or of the lessons or of the topics that you are learning. It's just that its level is different or varies. So that's why there is continuity. Now, interaction. For the interaction, we have to make sure also that this would be part of the language learning process, as students need to interact among each other. Integration, we have to integrate a lot of things, not only technology that we integrate, but even we have to be multidisciplinary. We integrate context or another discipline in order to talk about a specific topic in grammar. So this would be part of the language learning process of our students. Learner-centeredness. So as a teacher, we have to make sure students are involved, students are engaged, and are being proactive on the activities you are giving them. Contextualization. Now, English language is not our native language, because our native language for us Cebuanos, of course, Cebuano Visayan. And since it's not our native language, then that means we have to make sure that we kind of contextualize the English language, like making sure we provide examples or situations that students could relate to. Because if we teach them a language and there is no, they would not be able to relate, it's gonna be different really to put it into their own perspective, and it would be difficult for them to actually learn it in a way, because they have not experienced firsthand what they are learning, those that you included in as their examples. Now, construction. As part of the language learning process is we'll let the students do something. We'll let the students write something. So that's construction. Now,
spiral progression.
See the next.
Skills, grammatical items, structures, and various types of text will be taught, updated, and reviewed at increasing level of difficulty and sophistication. As a consequence, students will be able to progress from basic to advanced levels of language usage.
Okay, so it's a good explanation about spiral progression, that there is continuity and at the same time level of difficulty, so that students would progress and would be able to advance. From beginner, you would advance to the next level. So that's the spiral progression. That's the principle behind. Now, just to review, which I already actually discussed, skills, grammatical items, structures, and various types of text will be taught, revised, and revisited at increasing levels of difficulty and sophistication, and it allows students to progress from the foundational level to higher levels of language use. This is the idea of spiral progression. Now,
interaction. Language learning will take place in a conversational atmosphere. Activities that simulate real-life events with varying language demands will be employed to help students communicate with others and improve their sociability skills.
So that is interaction. Students interact with each other. They are involved or they are engaged in conversational type of activities where they could use the language, and they would be having oral and written. They will be in a group. They will be able to interact.
Integration. The areas of language acquisition, receptive skills, productive skills, grammar, and vocabulary will be taught in an integrated way, along with the use of relevant print and non-print sources to provide varied perspectives and significant connections. Various types of integration can take place, either implicitly or explicitly.
So we have to make sure we integrate, we make use of text, print, non-print technology, as what I said earlier. And there's just a lot of ways that we could make the learning process of the students into, we could integrate it. Because especially nowadays, it's not just about the specific context, but it would be in a different medium, no? Students would learn from different medium. We could use the print, non-print, we could make use of the technology in order for us to make integrate specific medium to our teaching. So integrated way, we will be able to make it relevant to our students, meaningful as well. Integration class may come in different types, either it's implicit or explicit. Now,
learner-centeredness. The learner are crucial to the teaching-learning process. Differentiated education will be offered depending on the student's needs, skills, and interests. Effective pedagogies will be used to engage youngsters and support their language development.
So learner-centeredness, obviously you already know this, students' interests are catered. And at the same time, it's all about the students, what they want. Then learner-centeredness, learners are at the center of the teaching learning process, and teaching will be differentiated according to students' needs, abilities, and interests.
Contextualization.
Then we have contextualization.
Learning tasks and activities will be developed to help students learn the language in authentic and relevant circumstances. Lessons, for example, will be arranged around learning adjectives, a topic, or a text style to assist students in efficiently using associated language skills, grammatical item structures, and vocabulary in spoken and written language to match the purpose, audience, context, and culture.
So contextualization learning tasks and activities will be designed for learners to acquire the language in authentic and meaningful context of use. Now, for example, class lessons will be planned around learning outcomes, a theme, or a type of text to help learners use related language skills, grammatical items, structures, and vocabulary appropriately in spoken and written language to suit the purpose, audience, context, and culture. This is an example for contextualization. Now,
Construction. Making sense is essential for language learning and usage. Learning objectives and activities will be designed to provide students time to reflect and respond to concepts and information. Learners will be provided with sufficient scaffolding so that they can fulfill their full cognitive, emotional, and psychomotor potential and become independent learners who are good meaning consumers and builders.
So that is construction. Students are going to create something. Now, construction, making meaning, is the heart of language learning and use, and learning tasks and activities will be designed for learners in such a way that they will have time to reflect on and respond to ideas and information.
Component 2 addresses the knowledge and skills
Effective
needed for
language
appropriate
use.
language usage that will be acquired through language arts. The macro skills of the language are useful in 3 ways: understanding of cultures, understanding language, and processes and strategies. They are the knowledge and skill domains essential for efficient language usage as represented by language macro skills.
Okay, effective language use. So component 2, 3 major applications of macro skills of the language is that we understand a culture, we understand the language, and above all, as well, we understand the process and the strategies.
Understanding
understanding
cultures. Students are exposed to numerous civilizations across the world, including their own, via learning language through text types and literary appreciation. Learners gain sociolinguistic and sociocultural information which they can apply to their language usage.
So that is multiculturalism, right? Understanding culture, and then learning language through text type. So that's why we really integrate different, or we make use of different texts, no? Avoiding articles. It could be also a story coming from a different country. So through that, we are learning culture. We're understanding the culture, of course, using the English language. And literary appreciation exposes learners to different cultures of the world, and that includes one's culture. Now, we do have the mother tongue, the Filipino English. This actually is a unified framework which allows easy transitions from acquiring and learning one language to the other. So our very own mother tongue is also important for us to acquire another language. Learners develop social-linguistic and sociocultural understandings and apply them to their use of the language, mother tongue, Filipino, and English. And social-linguistic understanding actually refers to appropriate language use, and it is defined in this document as taking into account the social significance of linguistic forms and the linguistic implications of social facts. The sociocultural understanding class, it refers to knowing about the language speaking community. So this is sociocultural understanding. We have to know the language speaking communities of the language we are learning. And it means taking into account the non-linguistic features in the life of a society, and learners as well broaden their frame of reference beyond their own social and cultural experiences.
Understanding language.
Now,
Learners utilize their knowledge of the language system to create sense and produce meaning. When they engage with a range of texts to make sense, kids learn to comprehend the patterns and rules of the language. They use their knowledge and skills by developing their own spoken, written, and visual communications.
That's understanding language. Now, learners apply their knowledge of the system of the language in order for them to make meaning and to create meaning. So what you learn about a language, its system, the rules and such, you have to apply that so you could make and create meaning. And then they come to recognize the patterns and rules of the language, which emerge as they interact with plethora of texts, literary and informational, in order for us to make meaning. They actually apply this knowledge and understanding in order for the students or for them to create their own spoken, their own written and visual text. So those are very important. The knowledge and the skills para students could create a dialogue, or they could respond, they could speak, they could write something, and they could visually create something in their mind. And then
Process
we have
and
process
strategies. Learners select from a repertoire of processes and techniques depending on their understanding on how language works for a range of purposes in a variety of situations. They consider how they use language and apply a variety of linguistic strategies based on their goal, context, and audience. Language is used by them to deal with new ideas, resolve challenges, and solve problems.
Process and strategies. They select from a repertoire of processes and strategies and reflect on their understanding of the way language works, here class for a variety of purposes in a range of contexts. They deliberate on how they use language and apply different language strategies depending on their purpose, the context, and the audience.
Component 3 demonstrates that interconnectedness and interrelationships of the language macro skills and development of thinking abilities that allow pupils to generate sense via language. Abilities, grammatical elements, structures, and various sorts of text will be taught and reviewed and progressively higher levels of difficulty and sophistication. Students can graduate from fundamental level to higher degrees of language usage using this approach.
So interconnectedness and interrelationships among macro skills, no? This is component 3, making meaning through language. Language class, it's the major instrument for us to communicate, may it be oral or written, and the heart of which is the exchange meaning. Language learning focuses on guiding students make meaning through language for a different purpose. Why are we using language? Of course, we do have a range of topics to talk about, and the purpose as well, and different audiences. Students must be able to adapt to various situations where communication demands greatly vary. So communication demands. And the skills, the grammatical items, the structures, and the various types of texts will be taught and revisited at increasing levels of difficulty and sophistication. This is the principle of spiral progression. And this design allows students to progress from the foundational level to higher levels of language use. Now, language teaching components, we do have the learners. Learners should know and develop. For the know, it's the system about the language. No, we look into the grammar, vocabulary, and the functions. But when we develop, that's now the skills, the macro skills. We do have the receptive. Receptive is we intake. Productive is we produce. So for the receptive skills, we have listening and reading. For the productive skills, speaking and writing. Now, the language arts and multiliteracies curriculum, or the LAMC, is composed of 5 intricately intertwined and integrated substrands. And viewing is part of it. We have listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing. And they actually serve as the building blocks for understanding and creation of meaning and for effective communication across the curricula. We have the guiding principles. Remember, an effective language arts and multiliteracies curriculum, we have to satisfy the following principles in order for us to claim that we have a effective language arts and multiliteracies curriculum. Number 1, develops thinking and language through interactive learning. You have to make sure you develop the students' thinking and language by making it interactive. Second, develops communicative competence and critical literacy. Third, draws on literature in order to develop students' understanding of their literacy heritage. So we make use of the culture, no? And at the same time, the literature, the literature existing. And then fourth, draws on informational texts. And at the same time, class, multimedia in order to build academic vocabulary and strong content knowledge. Fifth, develop students' oral language and literacy through appropriately challenging learning. Now we have here alignment of the language and literacy domains with the 5 substrands. We have listening, speaking, reading, writing, and viewing. For example, the integrated language arts domains, and these are the integrated language arts domains: oral language, phonological awareness, book and print knowledge, alphabet, phonics and word recognition, fluency, spelling, writing and composition, grammar, awareness and structure, vocabulary development, reading comprehension, listening comprehension, attitudes towards language literacy and literature and study strategies. And we check on which specific strand these specific integrated language arts domains are aligned to. Or, for example, listening, which specific integrated language arts domain could we say listening is aligned to? So you could align it to oral language, phonological awareness. Why this such an alphabet knowledge? Yes, phonics and word, okay, listening, right? So grammar, writing and composition, even grammar, vocabulary, listening. So this is now the alignment. So there is specific, of course, when we say writing, di pwede oral language because magpa-write ka, you would not let the students actually speak, right? So this is not inconsistent with the proposed 5 strands of the language arts and multiliteracy curriculum, but fleshes out the areas class the children need to learn and the teachers need to teach in greater level. So the K-12 languages curriculum actually ensures that processes and products of learning actively foster and contribute to the achievement of the basic education program goals. Competencies are spiraled across the curriculum and year levels, and upper level courses will focus on writing, comprehension, and study strategies. Content includes print and electronic texts that are age, context, and culture appropriate.
Component 4 describes the language arts and literacy curriculum's holistic evaluation, which provides a feedback on its efficacy, to students, instructors, school officials, and curriculum authors. Holistic assessment refers to the continuous collection of information on many characteristics of a child from various sources with the purpose of providing qualitative and quantitative feedback to aid and steer the child's growth. Characteristics of assessment.
Okay, we have characteristics. Component 4, we have the holistic assessment. Assessment is an important aspect of learning and teaching, and it should be effectively used for the holistic development of our pupils, and our assessment practices should go beyond summative evaluation and move towards a more holistic approach. Holistic assessment class refers to the ongoing gathering of information on different facets of a child from various sources, with the aim of providing qualitative and quantitative feedback to support and guide a child's development. Holistic assessment informs our teachers of their teaching practices and guides them in the design and delivery of student learning. It will also enable parents to support their children's development and growth. We have characteristics of assessment. We have to make sure there is proximity to actual language use and performance, a holistic view of language, integrative view of learning, developmental appropriateness. Also, we have to make sure we do multiple referencing, and proximity to actual language use and performance. So assessment procedures should be based on activities that have authentic communicative function, rather than the ones with little or no intrinsic communicative value. We have to make sure there is authenticity, in our activities. So,
proximity to actual language use and performance. Actual communication functions, rather than activities with little or no inherent communicative value, should be focus of assessment processes. These exercises are based on true performance in realistic settings that the learner is likely to encounter in everyday life.
Next, we have
proximity.
A holistic view of language. Assessment procedures are based on the notion that the interrelationships among the various aspects of language, such as these areas of phonology, grammar, and vocabulary, among others, cannot be ignored. So it should actually be considered. Phonology, the sound, the grammar, encompassing a lot, syntax, even morphology, and the vocabulary should be non-negotiable. Dapat kahibaw mo, kahibaw taan na. So,
a holistic review of language. The interdependence of many language properties such as phonology, grammar, and vocabulary, among others, cannot be overlooked in evaluation systems. The four language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, are also viewed as part of a larger totality.
And then we have an integrative view of learning. Assessment attempts to capture the learner's total array of skills and abilities, and it measures language proficiency in the context of specific subject matter. So, integrative view of learning.
Integrative view of learning. The evaluation process aims to capture the whole set of skills and abilities possessed by the learner. It evaluates linguistic ability in the context of a certain subject. The evaluation methodologies are based on the assumption that many aspects of a learner's life, both academic and personal, are critical to the development of language proficiency and should be disregarded.
Now, developmental appropriateness. Assessment procedures set expectations that are appropriate within the cognitive, social, and academic development of the learner. So let's try to take a look at this. Integrative view of
developmental appropriateness. Assessment strategies provide expectations that are appropriate for the learner's cognitive, social, and academic development. This component of assessment makes it particularly useful for second language learners who come to diverse cultural backgrounds and may have had unusual educational experiences.
Multiple referencing. Assessment entails obtaining information about a learner. We have here numerous sources and through various means. And for students, assessment should allow them to see their own accomplishments in terms that they understand, and consequently allows them to assume responsibility for their learning.
Multi-referencing. Assessment comprises gathering information about the learner from a variety of sources and methods.
Okay, this is the end for lesson 3 under unit 2. We're done now talking about the components of the English K-12 English curriculum. So I will see you on the last video lecture for unit 2. You have to watch this video lecture. I hope, class, you learned a thing or two from me. I will see you on the next video lecture. Bye, everyone.